Why are killer whales sinking sailing boats off the coast of Gibraltar? Find out on this episode.
We get some rum and beer, expensive, put in a reindeer, so you know we're gonna party till tomorrow.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Marine Conservation Happy Hour podcast. I'm here with Dr. Scarlett Smash, who needs her coffee.
I do. Oh, I didn't even have coffee. I didn't even get to have coffee. I know. Okay, it'll be okay.
And we're joined today by Dr. Naomi Rose from the Animal Welfare Institute, who is going to tell us about these infamous killer whales that are attacking and sinking sailing vessels off the coast of Gibraltar. Hello, Naomi.
Hello, and no, they are not attacking anything. We don't use that word. That is a bad word.
Bad word.
But isn't that what the media's saying? That it's some sort of revenge Jaws 4 type scenario? Can you tell us what's actually happening?
Okay, thank you for that. Yes, hello everybody. What is actually happening is these orcas, or killer whales, are playing a game. This is a very dangerous game they're playing, but it seems to be play. And the animals who are mostly involved, the ones who do it the most, are juveniles and adolescents of both sexes, and some adult females who are the mothers of those teenagers, who seem to be sort of supervising the mayhem and sometimes joining in. There are no adult males participating, and if it was aggression, it would almost certainly include adult males. And the fact that it is mostly juveniles and adolescents really does suggest it is a play or socializing type behavior. The unfortunate side effect of it is, of course, that sailors and mariners in that area are experiencing a lot of damage to their vessels. And unfortunately, 7 vessels so far have sunk. And nobody's been injured. Certainly nobody's been killed. I think it is an extremely rare event, statistically speaking. There have been hundreds of interactions, hundreds of them, and 7 vessels sunk. If you do the statistics, it's less than 1%. So a lot of people are asking me, but isn't this what they're trying to do? And I said, they're very competent. If they wanted to sink your vessel would sink. So what's happening is they're ramming the rudders. That's what seems to attract them, is the rudders. It's a perfect platform to smash your head against. And so they're ramming the rudders, and on 7 occasions, breaking the rudder breached the hull, and that vessel sank. But that does not appear to be the point of the game.
Do we know why they're going for these rudders? What is it about the rudders that really interests them?
Yeah, I mean, what is it about these rudders? So orcas are very competent predators. In this area, they feed on bluefin tuna. This is not how they kill their prey in this area. They don't ram their prey. They chase it and they catch it and they eat it. And so ramming is a foraging or hunting behavior in mammal-eating orcas. Sometimes a porpoise or a dolphin will fly right out of the ocean and into the air because an orca has rammed it so hard. So it is a behavior in their repertoire. What it is about these flat, spade-like rudders, that's what they're called, spade rudders, and they're on sailing boats for the most part, although they have interacted with fishing vessels and a couple of other types of boats, motorboats. But that spade rudder on the yachts, on the sailing vessels, seems to be the thing, the toy. And no, we have no idea what it is about these spade rudders. If we did, we could probably stop it. We could probably stop the behavior. So one of the things that's being tested this season is modifying the rudder's appearance and texture. Perhaps if it feels different or even feels uncomfortable when they ram it. So putting little cones, like pimples, sharp little pimples all over the rudder, which shouldn't harm its hydrodynamics, but would be a bit of a surprise when you rammed it.
Like a goth rudder.
Yeah, like a goth rudder with rhinestones or what are they, metal
studs,
brackets all over, studs, thank you, all over it. Yeah. So if that works, then we would urge all the mariners to modify their rudders this way. There are other things that are even less expensive and less permanent. And all of these are being tested this season, by the way. One of them is a hukilau. And the hukilau, which should be familiar to some folks, it's a Polynesian word, and it's used to refer to a fishing method. And the Polynesians used to drop vertical lines weighted down by some sort of weight. In those days, it was probably rocks, but now it's metal weights. And they drop the lines into the water. It's not a net. It's just a bunch of vertical ropes with weights at the bottom. And fish and cetaceans don't like going through vertical lines. Who knew? It's not a solid barrier. It could be. It's something that certainly an orca could swim through easily, but they don't like them. And they will swim away from them. And that's one of the reasons they're so effective as a fishing method. And they have been used. Hukilaus have already been used on orcas to herd them out of entrapments, out of shallow areas where they've become entrapped, over some shallow area they're reluctant to pass. And the Hukilau will force them to go through this area they're reluctant to pass out into the open ocean, and boom, they're free. So we already know they don't like them and that they'll swim away from them. So we're also going to test that. So if you put a line, a barrier basically around your rudder, and it's something that you use at need. So the whales are suddenly there and they're ramming your boat. Boom, you drop the Hukilau off the stern, and they're all weighted. They're lines that are just lined up on your deck, and you throw them over the side, and they're attached to the boat, and they form this barrier around the stern. Maybe the whales won't approach the rudder. So we've discussed all of this at a workshop in February. And the Spanish government sponsored a workshop that I attended, and we brainstormed. We were all a bunch of orca experts and cetacean experts and enforcement experts, because this has to be something that doesn't harm the whales, is non-injurious, but effective. And so we're going to test all of these methods. Some of them are acoustic, the Hukilau, modifying the rudder, and so on. Decoys. Could you give them something that's even more exciting, a toy that's even better, and it's cheap and easy to throw over the side? So we're testing all of these. I say we, but it's the Spanish and Portuguese governments. But we're testing these methods this season, and hopefully we'll be able to give the mariners the tools to deter the whales. But for the moment, we're just urging them to avoid them. So if they're told there's a bunch of whales over here, don't go over there. Go somewhere else. Sail around them. Avoid the interaction altogether if you can.
And if you can't, then you're just basically like a delivery guy or a mail guy, and you're like, treats, dog, and you're like,
you're trying to, I mean, that's a really good analogy. That you're like the mailman who always has to keep his or her eye out for the dog that's running loose, and you've got all of these, treats, distractions in your pockets, and boosh, go over there. Don't buy it. So you're like toddlers, distract. And that is pretty much what you're dealing with here. Not toddlers. They're worse than that. They're hoodlum teenagers. But we do think that's what it is. I mean, think about when you're a teenager, and orcas are very similar to us in development. They age at about the same rate we do. So when you're 12, 13, 14 years old, you are a teenager in orca society. And your judgment is impaired. You tend to act on impulse. This is a hormone thing, right? Your body's changing. You're going through puberty, and teenagers don't like to hear it, but they make bad choices. And that's sort of what's happening here. And the interesting thing about orcas is they do occasionally, in various populations, pick up fads. Literally. They're just like fashion fads in humans. They'll start doing something that has no purpose. It's even silly from our perspective, and I suspect actually from theirs as well. And they pick it up for a while, and then they drop it because it becomes boring. So the orcas in the Pacific Northwest here in the United States started wearing salmon on their heads. It's a famous story that they did this. And they did it for a season, and then they stopped because, salmon is food, right? So they stopped playing with their food. They'd rather eat it. Fine. 20 years later, it showed up again. They started wearing salmon on their heads again 20 years later, and you wonder if the toddlers of the original era saw their parents or their siblings, older siblings doing it, and then they grew up. 20 years later, they said, hey, I remember when I was a really little kid, I saw the adults in my population or the teenagers in my population doing this. I think I'll try it. And then it's a fad for the season again. And then they said, yeah, this really is boring. I'd rather eat the fish than wear it on my head.
So it's like the behavioral version of bell bottoms.
Exactly. It's a fashion fad, and it comes back. Fashion comes around again. Bell bottoms are big again. They were big in the 70s, and now they're big again. And so what's different about this is it's persisted for 5 seasons now. Usually fads fade after a year. I mean, there's been other fads in orca populations elsewhere. Games they play for a year or so, these fashion fads that they do for a year or so. This one is persisting, and that worries us. Whatever the gratification is, which I actually think is just, it's a hoot. They enjoy it. And in fact, some of the things the sailors are doing, like shooting flares at them, dropping firecrackers on them, pouring gasoline on their heads, which is extremely dangerous for everybody involved, very potentially harmful to the whales, not legal, all of it illegal, because these are critically endangered orcas. This is a population that only has 40 animals in it. And 15 of them are doing this, so it's a bad scene. And so the sailors are getting very frustrated, but it's not working, is it? It's 5 years now, and they're still doing it after all these firecrackers and flares and stuff. And so I actually think they've upped the stakes of the game. What was just a bit of a hoot has become, oh, maybe if we do it like this, they'll drop a firecracker on us. Ooh, teenagers have bad judgment. They do dangerous things. It's crazy and stupid and reckless, but it's kind of what teenagers do. And so I worry that not only aren't all of these deterrents, these bad illegal deterrents, not working, so I urge the sailors to keep that in mind. They're not working, so stop doing them, but they may actually be making it worse. Do you see what I'm saying? We want them to be bored.
And here you are giving them firecrackers. I mean, yes, you're giving teenager firecrackers. Come on.
And they're dangerous, but they are dangerous for the whales. They could hurt their hearing. They could do all sorts of things. But the point is that instead of making it boring, you're making it more of a dangerous thrill. So stop doing it. Just avoid it if you can. And if you can't, do something boring and non-harmful, like a hukilau, or putting little, pimples or studs on your rudder. And those things won't harm the whales, but, they're drag, and they'll get bored by it.
So the hukilau looks like a bead curtain.
It does. It looks just like a 1970s bead curtain. Oh. But it doesn't have beads all the way down it. It just has a big bead at the bottom, which weights it down and keeps the line straight. But it does literally look like the kind of bead curtain when you're going through a doorway. And again, that's how easy it would be for the whales to go through it, but they don't like them. Mm-hmm. And in fact, a bead curtain on a doorway to any cetacean, actually, none of them like it, would be as effective as a door. And so if the hukilau works, I think everybody could just go to a marine store, buy a bunch of line, cut it into the right lengths, put lead weights on the bottom or metal weights on the bottom, and then just line them up on their deck at the stern. And as soon as the whales are there, everything over the side, and you've got a barrier around your rudder. We'll see if that works.
I think that's a great idea. I really hope it works. I didn't really realize they were throwing firecrackers.
They are doing all sorts of things. They're throwing rocks at them. They're bringing chains, really heavy metal chains out and throwing those at them. They're literally trying to deter them with pain. And it's not working. And that's what the message I want to get across to the sailors, the mariners, is it's not working. And if it's not working, don't do it.
But they're not even concerned. They're just so angry with the...
They're very angry. Yeah. I mean, it's scary. Just imagine how frightening it is.
Oh, yeah. I did want to ask that. You mentioned that a few of them capsized, right?
Well, 7 vessels have sank, yeah, okay. Or have sunk. I never know what the past.
Yeah. And that was while they were on the boat?
So the whales started ramming the rudder. The mariners called the Coast Guard at some point or other in the interaction. Some of these interactions last for 2 hours. Can you imagine having orcas ramming your boat for 2 hours?
2 hours? No.
Yeah. So at some point during the game, they breached the hull. They broke the rudder in a way that actually caused a breach in the hull. The boat starts taking on water. They throw their lifeboat over the side, and then the Coast Guard gets there and rescues them, and they watch their yacht sink beneath the waves. So it's pretty annoying.
Yep. Is it insured?
That's the thing. Yes, actually, that's a good point. And they do probably get some money back, but that's not the point. In some cases, these boats are brand new. They're actually being delivered from the United Kingdom to somewhere in the Mediterranean. by shipyards in the UK. Can you imagine you just bought a brand new yacht and you find out orcas sank it or damaged it, to the point it was unnavigable? That's just really, really annoying. And I'm very sympathetic to the mariners, but it doesn't justify doing something not only that's dangerous to the animals because they are critically endangered, they're protected by European Union law, it's illegal. So that's not the only reason, though. It's sometimes dangerous for the mariners. Some of these guys have been trying to electrocute the whales with cattle prods.
What?
Water and electricity don't mix, even for the people on the deck. So none of this stuff is safe. And it's just not safe for the whales, but not safe for the mariners. And again, I can only urge them to consider the logical fact that it's not working. It's not working. So not only is it not working, but, it has spread in the population. It started with about 3 animals. Now there's 15. They didn't sink any vessels initially, but then they started occasionally sinking them. So they were increasing the intensity of their interactions, of the ramming. So no matter how you slice it, all of these things the mariners have been doing not only haven't been working, but may have been making it worse. Stop doing it. I get how annoying it is, but let's do something that works. So we're testing all these different methods. We're urging the mariners to try harder to avoid the whales. They are getting as near real-time information via apps and via radio. The whales are over here. Please sail over there. We're trying to, again, the Spanish and Portuguese and even the Moroccan government are trying to give them that information. These interactions are happening all the way up and down the Iberian Peninsula coast, not just in Gibraltar, which is a very small part of the area. And they are actually having interactions all the way up the coast of Portugal, up into the Bay of Biscay, which is in the north, off of Galicia, which is part of Spain, but in the north. So it's not just the opening of the Strait of Gibraltar, which goes into the Mediterranean, which the whales very rarely go through. They don't actually go into the Mediterranean that often. This is a small population that lives here and eats bluefin tuna. It's called the Iberian orca population. There's about 40 animals in it. And we really, really hope they get bored soon.
So killer whales occasionally attack and eat sunfish. Yeah, so for people who don't know, they look like a kitchen table that has fins on.
Yeah.
And apparently they're really yummy to killer whales for some reason. I was just thinking that sunfish kind of look like some of these rudders.
It's funny you say that. We are curious, of course, very curious as to why these spade rudders are so attractive. But think about it. It's these whales. No other whales, no other population of whales is doing this. It is an extremely localized problem. Yes, orcas ram other boats, by the way. Other orcas ram boats, I should say. It's happened before. It will happen again, but it's an extremely rare, one-off, when it happens, kind of event. They occasionally, for some reason, ram a boat. What's different here is the persistence and the consistency of the type of interaction, the persistent ramming multiple times a year, year after year for 5 years. So that's unusual, like beyond unprecedented. It's never happened before. So in terms of sunfish, it is true that there are, even bluefin tuna, if you know how big they are, they kind of are shaped, in a teardrop, not a teardrop, a teardrop way, or look like an eye. They're sort of long and, so it could be that. But as I said earlier, orcas in that area don't hunt or kill bluefin by ramming them. Interestingly, when they do attack and kill sunfish, mola mola, they do ram them. So yeah, it could be that, but they certainly know by now. Let's put it this way. It's the same individuals who keep doing this, and they've been doing it for 5 years. So they know perfectly well these things aren't food. Because when they do break a piece off, which they occasionally do, again, there's been almost 1,000 interactions in 5 years, and they've broken about 200 rudders, okay? Rendered the vessel unnavigable. They've only sunk 7, which is, again, less than 1%, but they have damaged, so seriously damaged 20% of the vessels. They know perfectly well by now that it ain't food. It breaks off its fiberglass and, some other plastic or whatever, and they play with the pieces. They push the pieces around at the surface and then they swim away. The game is over. They swim away. They usually swim away without any damage. 80% of the time, they do no or minor damage and swim away. So there's something about the ramming that gives them a kick. And they, the average length of the interaction is 25 minutes. This is a game. And after about a half an hour, they get bored by it and they swim away.
Yeah, that would be actually interesting to see if they are listening and enjoying the reactions of the people on the boat.
I thought about that a lot. We have urged people to do nothing.
Yeah, just sit there, be quiet.
Just be silent and actually do nothing. Just drop to the deck and
Like a
play
bear.
dead.
Yeah.
Yes. The point there would be do nothing to gratify them. If what they're looking for is a reaction, don't give them one.
Mm-hmm.
Very few people have followed that advice, and I don't really blame them. It's kind of hard to do nothing when a very large ocean predator is ramming your vessel. But that is the advice they've been given, to play dead.
That's good. That's good.
Give them nothing. Give them nothing. Give them no reaction whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
The media has portrayed these yachts as like millionaires' yachts, and they're going, yeah, sink the billionaires, sink Jeff Bezos and
my
Elon
goodness.
Musk and so on. But it's not, is it? It's like someone who's retired and then used their savings to buy a yacht to go out fishing. Or
the most recent sinking, which was in April, was of a couple in just that situation, I believe, although they weren't even wealthy enough to buy a vessel. They were renting it. It was a rental. I always make jokes when I'm in rental cars. I'm like, throw that on the floor. It's a rental.
Yeah.
Don't
get the insurance.
But they didn't lose any personal property, but except what was on board. But somebody lost something, and it was a company. Yeah, so it's not. They favor. This is a good point, a good piece of data. The vast majority of vessels that are targeted are sailing boats that are less than 45 feet long and going about 6 knots under sail or with the motor on. So they're just looking for that spade rudder on a sailing boat less than 45 feet long. That's not really your billionaire's yacht.
Mm-hmm.
That's your retired couple's yacht. That's your middle class yacht. I'm not saying these people, aren't affluent. Obviously, if you're on a sailboat anywhere that's, about 45 feet long, 30 feet long, you've got some money. But, let's face it, this is the vast majority of the world, the middle class from any country. They've had Japanese crews, they've had European crews of all nations. They've had lots of people on board these boats. Remember, I was telling you how the shipyards in the UK build them and they get delivered to the Mediterranean by being sailed down. They're staff.
Mm-hmm.
They're hired to bring the boat to the buyer, and then they fly home. So they're not even the owners. They're just employees. That's who's being targeted, and that's who's freaking out on board, on the deck, when these whales start ramming the vessel. It's not fun. I totally get the humor. I crack up every time I see these memes, but I wish people would stop. As ripe as this issue is for humor, I wish people would stop, because it just makes the mariners, including these workaday blue-collar guys who are sailing from point A to point B, angry. They feel like they're being laughed at, and it makes them more likely, in my opinion, to try to harm the whales to get them to stop. And it's a tense, unhappy situation. It's not funny, not to the people involved, and frankly, not to the whales. They are laughing. I do think they're actually having a good time, but it is dangerous for them. And we're not even sure, because the stranding networks in that area are not great. They try, but they don't have a lot of money. They don't have a lot of infrastructure or resources. We're urging the governments to beef up the stranding response, because some animals have died in these past 5 years from this population. I think it's four stranded animals have been recovered. That means a few more have died and sank. And yet they were not necropsied very well. There wasn't a lot of good data from the necropsies, because the carcasses were largely decomposed by the time they were reached. And so we're not sure if some of these actions being taken by the mariners have not proved fatal they may very well have proved fatal to at least a couple of whales already. That's a very high stakes game. And that is not funny. So far be it from me to be the killjoy in the room, and I get the humor, but it actually isn't a very funny situation.
Well, that was really useful information, and just don't send those memes around about the killer whales.
Stop it.
Think twice before you do that.
I really think it's funny too. I do, but if you're the person on the boat who is being rammed by a killer whale, it's not funny.
Totally get it.
Well, thank you very much, Naomi, for joining us. Thank you very much, Smash, for being my co-host. And thank you very much, Marine Conservation Happy Hour crew, for tuning in.
This is the Marine Conservation Happy Hour podcast. This podcast is produced and edited by Absolutely Smashing Events and Consulting. The music in this episode is by Jolly Shore Leave. If you're interested in sponsoring an episode, or you would like us to show up for a special event, email us at info@absolutelysmashingllc.com.